All right, so this is John 14, verse 6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So this is something that Andrew's on here. Andrew and I had a conversation about this and trying to understand what exactly it means. Um, and that kind of instigated this episode because I was like, well, my friend Dale, he studies Aramaic and he studies the original language of Jesus, and let's talk to him about it. So, once again, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Dale, what is the meaning of this verse in your view?
It's funny, like Brian sent me like three different things, big chunks. And I was like, we could probably get to a sliver of a sliver of a sliver of one of those.
Yeah, we'll start with this,
Uh,
and this might take us the whole podcast, but if we move through it, we have a couple other ones as well. We have the Our
well,
Father we can look at, and then we have the beginning of John. The beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and so forth.
yeah. Um, well, there's a little bit of a calibration that has to happen first. A certain quote like the map is not the terrain. You and I have talked about that
Sure.
ad nauseum, Brian, and probably will too, and some others that are on here right now. But it's kind of like if you're sort of given. I'll give you a word in Aramaic, and it's actually in this. It's in this phrase, shara. It's a word that means absolute truth. Has nothing to do with what happened or didn't happen. Okay, truth has nothing to do with details. Truth has nothing to do with the road bends left versus right, because that's obviously a matter of perception of which direction you're coming from. But it's as if there's these, you remember Light Bright when you're a kid, and like, or even Battleship, all these different games in the 70s that you kind of had these little pins with lights. And it's almost like you have to sort of peg enough of the locator pins before the map that everybody's been following kind of shifts into its proper position and drops down on the playing board. And then when it does drop down on the playing board, of course, it's only then that it comes alive and lights up. It's a funny thing because, this isn't a passing fad for me. I literally laid my life down for this. It's funny because just this is the preface here. It's frustrating because you'll go and talk to 10 different people and get 10 different answers. So it's like I really, for decades now have been really focusing on why don't we just tear the thing down to the absolute foundation of the root sounds, of the hermeneutics, of the absolute literal base that we can get it to, and then move from there. So you're asking about John 14:6. So Inanna Wurcha Wushrara Wachai, right? That's what you're talking about. La'anash ata luat abi ela anbi. Yes. First of all, I always like to say this too. I'm pretty sure he didn't have somebody walking behind him with a dictaphone, a recorder, or a cell phone. The earliest that anything would have been written down is 20 years later. People will start arguing about Aramaic versus Greek primacy, usually people that haven't actually put a full lifetime of study into it. But all of that is just kind of details when I just focus on the first word of this phrase. What I'm saying is we're going to kind of focus in on truth versus little truth, as in what's true or not, real or not, which has nothing to do with the truth he's speaking of. When I get asked, this is the number one thing I get asked. How come if people are saying that, he was a divine being and we can do that too, how come he said I'm the only way? Which is funny. I'm like, well, I also remember him saying you can do all that I can do and even greater things, but it's easy to sweep that one off the table. the first thing we have to do is understand what anana means. First of all, in the Koine Greek, it's ego, as in the waffle. We say ego today, but that's not how it's pronounced in Greek. It's ego eimi. Ego, what does that mean? It means individualized self. Eimi is the word where am comes from, I am. Well, it's a problematic thing because in Aramaic, in Yeshua's language, there's no word for am. There is no am. There's only I. So that makes a little bit of a hitch right there, right off the bat. But understanding also in Aramaic, when we look at this word, we say this, anana. Anana is the word that comes out of our mouth. We actually don't see one word on the page. We see two, but neither of those is am. We actually see one word twice, and it's the word ana, or ina, or ina, or ana, depending on dialect, region, time, etc. So I'm just going to say ana. Ana means I. But on the page, it doesn't say I am. It actually says I. Okay? It's the same word twice right next to each other. What's really intriguing, though, is if you want to translate that, first of all, just black and white, it's I. Just I. Have you heard I before? Oh, wait, yeah, who's that guy? Bob Marley, the Rastafari, Emperor Selassie, pirates, yes, they rob I, took I to the merchant ship. You know why that happened? Because the Ethiopic and Somali, Ge'ez, and Amharic languages came directly from ancient Aramaic and actually preserved the idea of what's in this phrase better than Christianity could ever come within 1,000 light years of doing. Interesting how that is a really deep piece of information that most people don't know. But what's interesting is if I'm talking about I, as an example, if Yeshua was talking about himself, he would say, like in a different phrase, ana lachma dachai, he would say, I, Yeshua, lachma, bread. There's a lot more than bread to that word, but dachai, life. I am the bread of life. If he was talking about himself. If he was talking here, he wouldn't be saying, what he would say was, ana orcha washwara wachai. Okay? When he was talking about himself, I, Jesus. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying I. Well, what does I mean? And this is the base where all of those I am statements, and they're all in the Gospel of John. There's some others of different forms in other Gospels, other places, at least in the primary four that we have, not going into all the Gnostic texts, etc. But really, they're all just located in the Gospel of John. So if I say I, what does that mean? That means I Deo. That means I Yeshua. Okay? So it's me talking about myself. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world, etc. But remember, what's really interesting is there's no M. The M, which is that kind of, it's almost like it allows some kind of tactile, like glue-like movement. I am that. In other words, it's like I'm smashing two ideas together and I'm saying I am that I am, etc. Ea ashar ea, the non-consumed burning bush in Exodus from Hebrew. And people say I am that I am. It's like, well, it also could be I shall be that I shall be. I am becoming that I am becoming. I am flowering that I am flowering. I am unfurling that I am unfurling. I am expanding that I am expanding. I am opening that I am opening, etc. So it's just one way of saying that. But looking at this here, I, what are we really getting at? And what we're really talking about is the same word twice. I got just a little candle here. When we hear that phrase I in the Aramaic, anana, first of all, it's a feminine term. What does that mean? It means that I'm not talking about something physical. I'm talking about an awareness of something. I'm not talking about this candle flame, but rather its reflection. This is the difference between masculine and feminine in Aramaic. Theologians will never learn this because the church doesn't even know it to be able to teach it, bless their hearts. But when you start looking at it that way, you're understanding that what we're talking about here is not Jesus as a person, but one way that an Aramaicist would say this would be an eye within the eye, presence within presence, etc. In other words, let me give you a quote from St. Francis. What you are looking for is what is looking. Not everybody picks that up. Kind of like opening your eyes, looking in a mirror, and understanding that what you're looking for is not what's reflecting, but rather what's looking. So he's not talking about just he, him, the reflection, the person. He's talking about, of course, Brian and I talk about this a lot, talking about a baby in those first few hours or days of life. Talking about that pure essence, which is really interesting when we get to the next word in the phrase, but we're talking about something that's an ancient Aramaic sound. It sounds like this: aura, 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 aura. It's in the word light, nura, nuhra. Of course, we know the word aura. It's in the word law that Yeshua spoke of, versus ordinance, which is the church stuff. 10 Commandments is not God's law. That's an ordinance written down. The aura, the law that Yeshua was always speaking of, was that innate guidance system. It's the inner GPS that lives through every single one of us. And start digging a little deeper into this. So, okay, I am. So what's another way of putting it? It's kind of difficult in English, but the I within the eye of the true. I generally usually just say I. A lot of times I just say I am because it's simpler instead of having to go into all that stuff. But, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Okay, now that's the 1611 King James. I am the way. Well, remember I told you that word aura. You know what the word way is here? Is warcha. Warcha. What does that mean? Of course, the root sound there is aura, which is what? Light. So what is light? And I want to come back to that idea of Anana. The light isn't the flame, okay? The light is the seeing. I know you're picking up what I'm saying. It's not what's seen. We'll come back to this with truth in Aramaic, but rather the process of seeing. And let me add this, I know you were there recently. First time, I've been going to, Abbey of Gethsemane in Trappist, Kentucky since 1993. First time I was there, it was October of 93. And I was inside with the monks. We were actually in the library and talking. And I'm like, well, I'm a huge Thomas Merton fan. And I'm like, he's buried here, yes. They're like, yeah, his cabin's in the back. And I had to arrange special privileges to go see it. We're talking 32 years ago. And they're like, his gravestone's out in the yard, out front. And they pointed me to it. I walked around for 40 minutes, went back in and said, I can't find it. They're like, oh, you're not paying attention. I went, it's not going to say Thomas, it's going to say Lewis, because he went as Father Lewis, even though his name was Thomas Merton. And the distinction I'm trying to kind of get to here is when we're talking about I am, we're talking about that deepest essence of who we are that doesn't matter whether it's Lewis or Thomas or whatever name you want to give it. Jesus, which means hail Zeus. Hello, what does it mean in Greek? People don't even know these things today, but it doesn't have anything to do with the label, but rather that process of pure seeing. Well, when you look at that word, I am the way, warcha, that word for way, I wouldn't call it, it's not way, but it's missing something there because the word light is in the word. The Aramaic word light, the root is right there, orcha. I would call it a path of light. I wouldn't say I am the way. I'm saying and Ana is the path of light, the path of, I try to shy away from the word enlightenment. The reason I say that, and, I know a lot of people could relate because people tend to think of it as a destination, like, oh, I'm enlightened now, so I can sit on a park bench like Eckhart did for 4 years. It's like, well, we're kind of talking about a journey here of seeing, eyes that see, ears that hear. So I would rephrase that as, that path of light. And then the next word that comes up, I am the way and the truth. The fun part of this phrase is the beginning and the end, that truth. So when I said truth, that's shara in Aramaic. Truth, when we hear shara, has nothing to do with, let's put it this way, there's a car accident and 10 people saw the car accident, and the insurance adjuster shows up and starts asking questions. The police are there, and then they get 10 different statements of what happened. What goes down in the police report? If 7 of the 10 line up together in what they saw, then that's what gets written down. Do you understand what I'm saying? Which could have nothing to do with what actually happened. What is absolute truth? I've been saying this for decades in my work. Like when I started doing breathwork in 89, and then it was in 93 again when I started doing that circular process that everybody and their brother and their 20 cousins do now. And I'm so happy about that because there's just no, Brian knows this, Annie knows this, there's no more beautiful key catalyst than breath. And that's a whole other podcast entirely. Ruha in Aramaic, Ruach in the Hebrew, Ruach in Arabic. But this path of light that moves into talking about this truth, it doesn't have anything to do with the details. It has to do with what is. And breathwork's one of those things that brings up this realization that we aren't twisted in a pretzel because of what happened to us as a kid. It's not true. We don't carry all this heavy emotional drama because of what happened, what was done to us, none of it. That's not true at all. It took me decades to realize this. It's not what happened that we get twisted in the pretzel about and lock up and have to deal with it the rest of our lives, but rather how we feel about our perception of what happened, whether it's true or not. It didn't even have to happen. If we think it happened and we lock that into the system, and how do you lock it in the system? By stop breathing. Scream a little kid into the fetal position. What are they going to stop doing? Breathing. So what stops? Breath. What is breath in Aramaic? Spirit. What does that mean? That means they're dead. They just died. And when they die and they stop breathing for that little microsecond, it takes almost like a little soul picture of that moment. And then you repeat it over and over and over again in your life and call it the truth. Well, you know what? I'll give you some truth. Brian knows this. A year ago, I found out that when everybody called me love child or chosen one or golden child as a kid, I thought it just meant that I got special attention. No. You know what the actual truth behind it was? Lots of people seem to know that my dad was not my biological father, but actually his best friend, which was confirmed last year. I was a love child. Interesting kind of thing. I picked it up. I was getting raped multiple times by someone in the family. The drunken stepfather's raping my sister, rapes my cousin, rapes my sister's friends. All these things are happening, but it's not what happened that's, in the sense, I don't even know the full truth. I never will in that sense. Because absolute truth, you're never going to have a full take of it. You can only take little pieces at a time, because if you ever met the full truth, you'd go the way of Ozzy Osbourne. You wouldn't exist as a physical body anymore, because nothing can come into the presence of the absolute but the absolute. So when he's talking about truth, he's not saying this is true. He's talking about something that is, excuse me, here comes the New Jersey language. It's so fucking pure, and it is so real, and it is so pregnant with light and fire and life that you cannot even begin to have a sliver of comprehension about it. That's what he's talking about when he says truth. So if someone says, is it true or is it not? I don't have a clue. I know one thing. I was in high school arguing with my U.S. history teacher, telling him that none of the crap in these Houghton Mifflin books about the Indian Wars was true. He's like, so you're saying this isn't what happened at Wounded Knee? That's exactly what I'm saying. And this didn't happen at Little Bighorn. Absolutely. And that didn't happen to Tashunkawitko, Crazy Horse, or Tatanka Yohata, Sitting Bull. That's exactly what I'm saying. And he's like, well, this is an official Houghton Mifflin government issued, kind of like what happens with religion. This is issued by the Catholic Church, the whatever church, and all of its 17,000 versions of the Bible. So what I'm saying is none of that has anything to do with truth. Truth is me and my little precious one, just one example, who just turned 3, and the connection. I think of that picture of Brian when your miracle was born, which seems like 2 weeks ago, and that the eye, the connection, that's Anana, that's the path of light, that's the truth. So if you understand what I'm saying, first of all, theology doesn't fit into any of this. Theology is nothing but it's a theory about something that has nothing to do with personal experience. Okay, so the way and the truth and the life. Well, life's an interesting word. Wachai, chaya, lachaya. To life. Yeshua said, "I come to give you chaya and give it abundantly. I come to give you life." Interesting. What's the word that he called this? He had a name for this thing. Never called this a body in Aramaic unless he was using the word pagra, which means corpse, a meat suit, literally. Never called it a corpse. Never referred to it in that way unless he was referring to a dead body. But what did he call this? Just in the Bible that we know of, he called it a what? I'm going to tear down this what? And rebuild it in 3 days. Temple. And everybody's thinking, you're not going to tear down this building. This is on the Mount of Solomon, and all this other. It's like, no, that's not what he's talking about. He called this a temple. What's the word temple in Aramaic? Haikla. Haikla. What's the root? Is chaya, energy, conscious presence, conscious life energy. That word wahai here, it's the exact same word in a slightly different form. I am the way and the truth and the life. I am literally, first of all, again, this isn't Yeshua talking. This is literally him speaking as a manifestation of the absolute. He's speaking as the 0 point, is a good way to put that, of the true stasis, of the 0 point. So people will say, well, Jesus and God is one and the same, because he said, when you see me, you see the Father. Well, exactly. And so are you. Like when he quoted, is not written in your law that I said that ye are gods. It's not plural, actually, in Aramaic or in Hebrew, but it's translated plural. Isn't it written in your law that I said that you are God? But I'll tell you this, all of our gods are facades. The gods that we apply isn't it. When I'm talking about the absolute, I'm talking about chai, that absolute conscious life energy, which can only be accessed when we're aware that we are not the center of the universe, but rather, in the words of Alan Watts, we are the universe looking at itself from billions of points of view, ever renewing itself so that the vision remains fresh. How many lights am I holding? 9 billion? No, 1. And it's funny, it hits that prismatic refraction, and it goes out into all those what? Angles. What's that word in Koine Greek? Anglos. Angles. Oh, wait, that's the word angel. In Aramaic, it's malaka, which is messenger. How are we the messengers? Because we are the wahai, we are life. We are the light of the absolute projected into what we call this physical dimension shot out in every possible direction that we can't even comprehend, looking like there's 9 billion people on the earth, when there's only the absolute and the everything. It's funny, like, mystics have been saying this for hundreds of years, and I've been saying it for decades. But I just found it funny that, like, the beginning of the universe used to be talked about like kaboom, men love bombs and like 4th of July and big firecrackers and loud noises. And it's funny, the closer science gets to the Big Bang, it gets us closer again to like what Alan Watts would say. It was more like a wiggle or a giggle. It was just the slightest little from why, from the absolute, from life, that just, and it's not nothing. It's no thing in a sense, but yet it's everything, but not yet. And, you know, we could start moving into all these other directions. I'm going to get the second half of the phrase, though. But so looking at this, what we're really talking about, it's not me, I, Jesus, Dale. It's the deepest essence, the I within the I that manifests, sees through as me, is consciously on that path of light. Consciously, not only on the path of light, but as the path of light, the absolute truth, which again, let me put it, you know, this way. When I say absolute truth, it's kind of like looking in a mirror. And mirrors are deceiving. But imagine if we were surrounded by a complete sphere of everything that looked really real. Is anybody aware of the Nobel Prize winners in 2022, the trio of guys? Nobody's talking about it in the news. It's been 3 years now, but they showed through science, through research, through documentation, that none of this is real, that it's a simulation, that there is no such thing as a local reality. You can add that into the NASA senior scientist who back in 2017 said that, well, he made a few statements. His name is gone. I'm 53 now. That stuff doesn't hold on very long anymore. But he did say that two things that got me. One, that we're continually flittering within an infinite multitude of dimensions of awareness in every present moment. And our brain takes those digital samples, kind of like listening to a CD or watching a movie, and it turns it into this fictitious analog sine wave in our head called our life. When the truth of the matter is, we're living multitudes of lifetimes in multitudes of dimensions of awareness, in multitudes of locales or locations. The other thing that was interesting that he said, which ties right in with this phrase, NASA themselves put out several statements talking about how time and space they felt was speeding up in such a profound degree that we were going to start feeling almost like, tell me if this sounds familiar, like an edginess, kind of like always rushing. Even when I'm not rushing, I feel like I'm rushing. Something how like everything, the world is speeding up. And they said this in 2017. Funny thing, but what they said was that we as of yet still have no technology effective enough to get outside of the time-space continuum efficiently enough to be able to prove that right or wrong. But through something called equidistant expansion, or what's the other, the expansionary constant, if everything's expanding at exactly the same rate, E equals MC squared, and it's all locked together, if Brian and I are both, our heads are expanding like balloons, not just our heads, but everything, looking at each other, and it's all locked into that continuum, we're not going to be able to tell because we have no way to measure it because everything is locked into that absolute. But we're going to feel it though. And I'll add this. When Yeshua spoke of the end of the world, he wasn't talking about time and space stopping. He was talking about us having the ability. Matthew 21, was it Matthew 21, Matthew 22, kind of out of my head, but he was talking about us developing the ability to come outside of the that envelope of time and space, which is what Anana is, which is the path of light, which is the truth, which is that pure life, pura vida, to be able to come out of that continuum to see things as they are, infinite. And this is the invitation he was giving us. If you look at that second part of the phrase now, and this is where stuff really hangs up. No one comes to the Father but through me. Father's an interesting word, and there's so many things I can say, but I just want to keep it as clear as I can. And I want to say this too. If you're getting challenged right now, I love you. Learn how to breathe. If you're you feel like you're being squeezed right now, it's because you're not breathing. And it's because you're holding on to something you've been holding on to for probably a really long time. The field, that he invites us to in the Gospel of John, in another I am phrase, talking about that field, it was translated as pasture. And we think the bunch of animals just kind of grazing in there. But he was actually talking about unepuk in Aramaic, a fertile field. This all comes from developing eyes that see, these openings of awareness. And when we talk about something like Father, no one comes to the Father but through me. Now, when I hear that in English, that's pretty absolute. That's pretty absolute. When you look at it in the Greek, it's not, in the Koine, it's not that far off from that. But before I get to that real humdinger at the end, the but through me part, I just want to address Father. Maybe I could have pulled up some images and things like that, but everybody has seen it's called the Supreme Ultimate in the I Ching. We tend to call it the yin yang here in the US. The Supreme Ultimate is that yin yang. And it's kind of like a couple of spermatozoa sort of swimming around in a circle, a light one and a dark one, and then there's a circle within each one. If it was more accurate to what the I Ching speaks of, it wouldn't be black and white. It would actually fade. They would fade into each other, and then you'd see like interspersement within both of the other. But it would be primarily more one than the other. Well, first of all, which one's the light? Which one's the white one? What's white? That's what? Is that the father or the mother? Is that the masculine or the feminine? The white one. What are they always telling us to go toward? The what? The light. Well, the masculine is represented by that white one. What are we always told to turn away from in the church? We're told to turn away from two things. We're told to turn away from darkness, and we're told to turn away from fire. What is fire? Nuhrata. Nuhrata is it's a fire that's so pure that it's clear. And let me put it this way, and this is a way of understanding Father. Let's say the Father is the Son. Okay. And when I say son, I mean S-U-N, son. Okay. The sun is the father and the moon is the mother. Okay. Another way we can look at it is the sun is the light of God and the moon is the light of human light. Now let's come back to the Anana, the I am, that light within the light, the I within the I. I didn't necessarily say light within light, but what's unique about moonlight versus sunlight? What's the difference between the two?
Moonlight's reflected.
One's a reflection, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Moonlight is reflected sunlight. Well, guess what? The word for moonlight is nuhra. And the word that Yeshua used for human awareness, human light, is ding, nuhra. So if moonlight is sunlight, then human light is God light. Now, what happens when you move closer to the light of the sun? What's going to happen? us as a human, a manifest being, you're going to what?
Right.
You're going to burn up. So now I'm going to ask something that New Agers don't like answering. I'll see it in their eyes, but they can't get the words out. And I'll say, okay, what happens when you move closer to the light of God? What happens when the light of the Father becomes so all-encompassing that it's as if you feel as if part of you is or needs to die and or is dying. So when you come closer to the light of the Son, you burn. What happens when you move closer to the light of the Father? You what? You burn. New Agers don't like saying that. They want to say, you're seasoned into the light of the, theology out the window. I don't do it. But why would you burn? Why would you experience pain in the presence of the Father? Because there's still something within you that believes that you are not that light. And this is how the church controls people. The church, who has no idea what the man ever said, none. And I say this out of all the love in my heart. I can name, I don't know how many of the TV evangelists and throw all these names out, bless their hearts. At least they're doing something constructive with their life. The ones that we lean on, the biblical experts, the ones that are running the theological seminaries, the ones that are training the ministers, don't even know where any of the teachings came from. Because they're looking for the Father as something that you can know. They're looking for teachings that are somehow written on a page. When Yeshua was not talking about anything on a page, he was talking about, again, the innate guidance, GPS system, whatever. So when you start looking deeper into this idea of a father, it's like, okay, well, hold on a second. There's really no such thing as a father until you have what? A mother. What we're talking about, there's not even a father until we have some sense of a creation. What is that? We're talking about duality. Bereshit etowiwa milta, wahal milta etowiwa lo etalaha. That's the beginning of the Gospel of John that you sent me. In the beginning was the Word. If there's anything you can't translate word as in Aramaic, it's word. Or Greek, logos. It's not word. That's Lexus or Lego in Koine Greek. Oops. We forgot that. Or maybe we just never knew it in the first place. If you imply that a word written on a page is the word of God, you are committing blasphemy. The word of God is the light that emanates from a baby. The word of God is what grows your fingernails. The word of God is what wakes you up in the middle of the night. That's the word of the Father. So when we're hearing about Father, what we're talking about here is going back right now in this present moment to the seat of creation. In other words, going back to the stasis, going back to that 0 point. Nobody can get to the Father but through me. Well, it's funny because it doesn't even say through me in Aramaic. It doesn't have the word me there, as a matter of fact. And this is one of those places where Bible people will say, well, it's implied. Ela an be, okay? Ela means not or no. Not, on, I'll come back to that, and then be. Be is an interesting sound. It's the second letter of the alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Dalet, Gimel, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kat, Lamed. I know that's not English, that's Aramaic, but what I'm saying is, intriguingly, the first, I don't want to go too deep into this, but the second letter B, bait, bet, beta, means literally the differentiation between something that has an inside and an outside. So when you hear through me, what it's actually talking about is not going like you can't pass, I'm the security guard at the door and you can't get through. That's not what it's saying. It has nothing to do with going through Jesus because, first of all, it doesn't really say me. What the best thing I can give you for being able to put that into words, that idea of Ela an B. An's an interesting word. It's like AHN in English, on. B means through. So we've got the through or into. You could even say pierce. But on probably the best way I can put that into English. See, this is where I start hanging up because it's really hard. Theology, you can make up stuff and just put things in there, and theologians are okay with that. But it doesn't necessarily mean this moment. But let me give you an example. John 20:22. It says, in the theology, it says Jesus breathed on them, boo, and says, receive ye the Holy Ghost. First of all, the word holy doesn't apply. The word's holos, holy in Greek. What does holos mean? It means whole, full, all encompassing, all embracing. But ghost has nothing to do with the phrase. The word's actually spirit. What does spirit mean? Spiritus. The word's rucha in Aramaic. It means breath. The whole all-embracing breath. Said, Jesus breathed on them and breathed on them. This is what's in the Bible, the accepted Bible, and said, receive ye the Holy Ghost, whatever. Let's just even say it was Holy Spirit, okay? But what's interesting is if in Aramaic, for it to be he breathed on them, it would have to be napak lahun. He breathed on them. Napak. Napak is soul, self, which literally means breath of life. You don't love someone as yourself in his language. You love every object of your attention as the breath of your life. Kind of like it said the other day that when Malcolm Jamal Warner passed away, he was in Costa Rica, caught in intense riptides, holding his 8-year-old daughter over the top of the water. And he did it so long that she survived. When they pulled his body out, they did CPR on him for 45 minutes and he died. But think how bad, think of the love in his heart that he was willing to give up the breath of his own life for the breath of his own life, and that he understood where his priorities are. So when I say love someone as you love yourself, what I'm saying is literally, how bad do you really want to take that breath? I mean, to me, how much more loving of a thing could it be? But when we look at that, he's not, it would have to be napak lahun. The lamed, the letter L essentially means on, toward, or at. But that's not what it says in Aramaic. It says napak bahun, which doesn't mean he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost, Holy Breath, but rather that he breathed with them. Or he breathed them through, as in through whatever was happening, and said, receive the all-embracing breath of the Absolute, of the Father. So when we talk about Father, what we're talking about is kind of coming back to a stasis. And then when we hear about this, it's not through me, but it's almost, if you take D'Olivet, which is like the absolute root of the root and bud of the bud, although that's E.E. Cummings, the root sound of on essentially means to pierce something so wholly and fully that it no longer exists. In other words, to so wholly and fully embrace and experience, when I think of Malcolm, and Malcolm was a dear friend of Nia's, Brian, who's like my sister, Nia Peoples. Dear friends, they grew up together on TV sets and stuff, so she's heartbroken about that. But just to go so wholly and fully into now, into the present moment, into whatever experience you're in, that there's no longer you plus an experience, but that you actually go through this. It's almost like a transcendence, which doesn't mean floating over the top. It just means ending a trance. If you're going, people ask me all the time, can't I just walk around the desert? Can't I walk around hell? I'm like, you can walk around hell forever and ever and ever. And it's going to keep burning your ass, and it's going to keep nipping at your nose until eventually you go through it and you realize, oh, it's not the valley of death. It's the valley of the shadow of death. Oh, so The eye within the eye is the path of light, that absolute truth that cannot even be fully comprehended, and that presence, essence, energy of life itself. No individual will ever be able to experience that and or transcend to the point of coming back to the 0 point of father and mother unless you're able to, rather than try to run from the present moment, be so wholly fully in it that I've heard this somewhere, I can't think of where, that it's almost like you experience the wow of the now. It's almost like there's a big glow in this present moment. But what we do is we spend our lives trying to run from it because of our awful childhood and all these other things. We have all these reasons I can't be awake right now because my head's too full of shit. And what I'm saying is exactly what, one of my teachers, beautiful painted arrow, Joseph Rael, Slutekoe is his name in Tiwa. He speaks of learning to go so deeply into now, learning to go so deeply into our own darkness that you realize at the far end of that tunnel of darkness, it's so pure that it's clear and begins to emit light. And then understanding that darkness, chashuka in Aramaic, I'll shut up after this, that darkness, all that means is I don't know what it is. That's all it means. There's no idea of bad. The idea that we have of sin, cheta, it means miss the mark. In Greek, in Aramaic, what it meant was just, guess what sin means in Aramaic? Mistake. I kind of meant to go that way, but I sort of went that way. Okay. What does evil mean? Evil means underripe or overripe. A stone green banana or a black oily oozing banana. And people still eat stone green bananas and get belly aches, and they still eat the black oily ones or freeze them. Makes great ice cream kind of stuff. But good and evil, it's not about living up to some kind of theological idea. Good is tuv, which means ripe, which means it's fertile and it's rich right now. Evil means anything that's not fertile and not rich now. All these ideas were added on, I say this with all the love of my heart, by people who have absolutely no idea where the story comes from, who may have written a lot of this down. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They give you that in your first class when you go to theological seminary. These are the people that we sort of let run all of this for us. But here it is. It says this stuff would be locked away until we were able to comprehend it. Well, guess what? It wasn't locked in a drawer, and it wasn't locked in a book, and it wasn't just locked in a cave. It was locked in our hearts. And now we can comprehend it. I love it because all I have is Will on my screen, which is great because I've known. So when I was writing my first book, I remember running into him when I was in the middle of writing it, and I'd already known probably 10 years at that point. But I've always thought of Will as this great exemplification of love and no BS, no belief systems. I'm not saying you don't believe in anything. He's a nihilist. He's probably one of those Lebowski guys. But what I'm saying is, we're all coming back to understanding these teachings, understanding that poverty isn't about what you own or don't own. It's about what you hold on to in your heart or what you're willing to let go of. And understanding that maybe sometimes it takes us being whipped around like rag dolls for a couple of thousand years before we go, okay, hold on. I think I'm willing to pay attention now. Because this that's happening now was not happening in the 40s, the 50s. It started crackling. I'm not saying nobody thought it, but not like this. When I did a Mary Magdalene event in 1991, nobody came because nobody cared. Nobody cared. If I started talking about Aramaic in 95, nobody cared. I went and put these things called the Magdalene activation tapes on the internet, if you've ever heard of it. In 1995, actually, my friend Joey did. He took these recordings of like 6 hours of me yakking on in 1995. It's 30 years ago about Mary Magdalene. And they kind of went viral, like all over the place. And I had to actually at the time have Joey explain to me how I don't understand how everybody's getting this. All these people's computers are connected. I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. Maybe we had to go through things like internet to understand how we're all connected. I don't know. But if there's anything I know after all the decades of study, I know that whenever I'm in arrogance, I'm clueless. If there's anything I know, it's that I don't know. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know why it resonates so much, although we feel it. When I, studied the historicity of Jesus away from the Bible through actual history, it was like those little Russian dolls, one inside the other. And then I got into the final one and I opened it up and I was like, oh, there's nothing there. But wait a second, there is something there. It's a mirror at the bottom, and it was looking at me. What I'm saying is, the details, the facts of things, they're never going to matter. What matters is how we feel. And how we feel is as immediate. In the Quran, it says, as your jugular, that Allah, which is the same word as Aramaic, it came from Aramaic, Allah, is as near as your jugular. We're starting to live that now. And anyway, that's what this phrase is about. And it has nothing to do with theology, and it has nothing to do with one person, because if it's about him, then everything he taught is a lie, including you can do all that I've done and even greater things. It's all a lie. And I could tell you, these Bible people can throw anything. Throw John 3:16 at me. I'll show you that I know every little nuance of every little word down to every little letter. And I have the spiritual experience to back it up, and that they don't know anything about the phrase. And I can do it with anything that came out of his, but I still don't know where it came from. Did he say it exactly as it is, and it remained exact for 20 years? You remember when you were in kindergarten and you passed the secret? But somehow, man, whatever's there, did the therapeute write it, which is what a lot of people, which kind of related to the Essenes, but not really. Who knows? But it's powerful stuff. And anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Just scratching the surface. And it's exactly 7:59. Wow.
I'm actually just going to open it up to you guys if you have any reflections, questions. Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. That was a wonderful outpouring of your passion for that subject. And there's so many moments during that my soul lit up in terms of just touching on that deeper truth that I feel like Jeshua was speaking for, I get an image of, or with that verse, like if you're thirsty, you have to drink water. Like some things are just kind of absolute and when we talk about the absolute truth, like there's just kind of I think it's that, we all meet that one within our own heart, the pure being or Christ. And he knows everything about us, and we, I guess are, met with ourself in that moment. But
That's the
it
fourth
really
beatitude. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. The
mm,
katnin watsain,
mm,
lakia nuta dehanun nesbun. It's, being so parched that there's almost no you left. And the benefit in that is all that you can be is 100% fully open. And like the father is the hydration, the father or the mother, whatever you want to say. You can call it goddess, you can call it Louise, as Wayne Dyer used to say. But I think he only said that because she signed his checks, Louise Hay. But yeah, beautiful.
truly.
Thanks, Dale. I feel it. I feel it, and I don't understand it, and I don't know what it is. I don't know anything about it, but I know what you're talking about. I feel it. So thank you.
That's it. That's it. I mean, that's it. I lost myself in details for so many years of understanding or not understanding. And Then I would go to these like Semitic language symposiums and watch them argue over jots and tittles and little periods and diacritical markings and stuff. And I'm like, y'all are like kind of a bunch of, excuse me, idiots. Has anybody actually tried putting it into practice?
Right.
And they look at me like lobsters crawling through my ears, like, okay, never mind. I won't talk again. Yeah,
I wonder
man.
I wonder if you can really understand this stuff until you've gone into your own heart and be like, God, I really want to know the truth.
Can't.
It seems
And
like
it's not translatable. Someone cannot translate something. I don't care how brilliant you are. You can't translate something that you haven't had fully translate, something you haven't had some sense of experience of. It's kind of like, we talk about artificial intelligence and I'm like, I use it, I'll throw something in the chat GPT or Grok. I get really cool stuff, it's fun, but it's not intelligence. Actually, it's intellect. It's not the same thing. And we talk about it becoming intelligent. And I'm like, well, it's not the same. It's not the same thing. We're talking about intellect. It requires input. The time we have to start going, oh shit, is when it does become intelligent. Then it's like, oh, what do we do now? Is it going to become intelligent? But it's like, that's the BS, the belief systems. We spend our lives beefing up something that, the Christians tell us. I don't like saying the Christians because some of the most amazing people I know are Christians and they have barely read the Bible. But what I'm saying is, that word hypocrite in Aramaic, the word's ape, which means persona, which is the Latin word for mask. So when Yeshua would say, that in which you judge another, you are guilty of practicing, he would say, he never said hypocrite. No. He said, that's your mask. They would have understood, his listeners would have understood 2,000 years ago, oh, that's the mask that the actor comes out wearing in a divine play. The whole point being that they drop it by the end of the play. So it's not even you judging them. And if you look at Sri Aurobindo in The Life Divine, he said that the ego is not bad. If people say ego death, I'm like, well, sure, kill your ego and then start walking out into the middle of traffic and walk off cliffs. Ego is not a bad thing. If you lose your ego, you're going to be on the floor slobbering on yourself. But it's being able to have that healthy relationship dynamic by understanding what Aurobindo said, that the ego is a supra-rational enigma. It's not really there. Or Yogananda, to transfer our sense of identity from the pseudo-soul, which is the screen we watch, the divine play, the lila, back to the inherent nature of our divinity. And then the key is not walking around like in all white all the time saying that you're a holy ascended being. I'm sorry, I get contacted by a lot of people that say that. And my initial response, I just want to say, if you're stating it, it's bullshit. So go away. Okay. Ego death stated is not ego death. But understanding that, to become that ever joyous witness of a stupendous cosmic drama. It's like, sure, I would love to be this fully enlightened being that like sits in a hut and all these people come to hear me, but I would miss peanut butter. And that's the truth. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in that. But, man, to taste it though, and to sort of stand in the presence of moments that I have no words for, I don't have a clue what's going on. I really don't. But anyway.
Yes.
Special shout out to my friend Daniel, who's joining us from Nigeria, Ghana. Where are you these days, Daniel?
I'm Togo. I'm in my vessel in Togo.
Togo?
Yeah.
Togo, okay. And he has raised his hand, which I think means he has a question. So go ahead, Daniel.
Actually, not a question, but I agree very much with what our friend just shared with us, and it's very inspiring and great. But in here, I wish we had more people like this in this my locality here, because many people, especially in our churches, just as he said, many of the Christians don't actually understand the Bible, but they teach what they don't know. You see, that's what's wrong with many of us here in Africa. I understand that. Teach, imagine something that is not even your language. We learned English. English is not our mother tongues, but they'll be convincing you on what they don't know about. And the churches, someone will be telling you it is like this. Someone you perfectly know, you understand the Bible more than you. Maybe you understand English a bit more than this person, and he's trying to tell you that he has the Holy Spirit. When you have the Holy Spirit in you, that's when you will understand the English written in the Bible. I don't think that's correct. So I buy this, your idea and your perception is very beautiful.
I was going to say, there's a phenomenal film, John Huston, Humphrey Bogart, Kate Hepburn, The African Queen. And there's this scene in the beginning of these missionaries, and they were in Congo, and they're singing all these English Christian songs. And all of the parishioners there in Africa are basically going, la, 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 la. They have no idea what they're singing or what they're talking about. And yet I kind of feel like that's sort of what, I'm not against like even missionaries, but when I hear someone talk about how we have to spread the gospel to the infidels or something like that, I'm like, you need to find the infidels in your own heart. You need to find it's funny too. Like when I speak of Yeshua, I'm like, he sure as heck didn't look like me, California Surfer Jesus. He would have looked like maybe Desmond Tutu with a little Osama bin Laden thrown in. I'm like, if you want to know what he actually looked like. But the crazy thing about it, think about the most politically and financially and spiritually ignored piece of land on this planet is the breadbasket, is the cradle of life where we all came from, Africa. Think about that. It's the most ignored place on the planet, except for the places that are rich in oil, because somehow we're supposed to teach you something. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. You know, one of the most amazing things for me was like 20 years ago, South Africa, which is, you know, there's a lot of wild stuff that goes on there, pro and con. But this choir named Voxy had taken my pronunciation of the Aramaic Lord's Prayer and they put it into a piece of music. It was a song. And it like sounded like so incredible and amazing. And it was still the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me with my work. But it's like, Yeshua wasn't teaching us to remember anything. He was showing us how to take all those layers off to reveal the inherent nature of our divine being. And you can't learn it in a book. And you know, agreeing to anything isn't going to change anything. What matters when we can finally learn to honor people as they are, where they are, maybe we can start moving forward. But I try not to hit at Christianity a lot. I used to a lot, but I feel kind of ashamed for a lot of what it became. And I'll tell you, he'd be the first one grabbed around the ankles and drug in the streets because he'd be dirty and his feet would be dirty and he wouldn't have had a shower in 2 weeks and his hair would probably be all scruffed out and he'd be the first one thrown out on the sidewalk. So I don't know. Sorry, went out off on a tangent there, but.
Andrew,
Yeah.
you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. So my question is around, you know, when we talk about Jesus is the way, the truth, the light, often it's in context of there's demons that you can worship or false idols. And then there's Jesus who represented the lived model of truth. And
Keep talking. I'll be right back. I want to grab something.
yeah, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. You know, there's some kind of more Christian-oriented books I read that talked about the deities worshipped in the Himalayas, for example, are more like demon spirits And, I've had my own experiences being dipped in the river Ganga and having my third eye blown open and just having a particular experience, a spiritual experience, which felt liberating, and laughed hysterically. And even just tuning into that energy again, like via um, like a song or something related to that place, that energy can
Sure.
activate. And
Yeah.
but it's been confusing because I come into this Christian context, which is more my lineage. And when they speak of like, well, there's all these other spirits, you gotta be careful of worshiping the wrong spirits and demon attacks and all these things. And that has a hard time mapping to the more non-dual teachings of
Mhm.
Yogananda, etc. So I'm curious how you integrate that in your worldview.
Well, what does demon mean? They just don't know what they're talking about. What does demon mean, especially in context of what Yeshua? Like, what are we taught demons mean? Let me put it that way. What are we told demons are? Something that comes in and kind of grabs on and inhabits, right?
Yeah.
Send out. So it's an interesting thing. The word demon in Aramaic, it's shiadain, shada. Okay, I want to show you what a demon means. First of all, I'm going to show you how to become possessed by a demon. This is the word force or spirit. This is rucha in Aramaic. Okay, this is the vibration of our nafsha, our soul. And I'm going to show you how to create a demon. You can make them yourself. That's a demon. How do you create a demon? You have an experience, you have something that pops up that happened to you 20 years ago, whatever. Like, put it this way, I talked about a little girl getting screamed into the fetal position when we started. Let's say she's 3 years old and she heard her dad coming home. She knows he always walks funny when he gets home late at night, but she knows he's going to want his ashtray. So she goes to reach for the ashtray just as the father walks in the door, and she hits it, and it's glass, and it flies off the table, and it shatters in 100 directions. So he comes up screaming her down into the fetal position, never touches her, never physically touches her, abuses her, screams her into the fetal position. What is she not doing? She's not breathing. So what happens is her breath of life takes a little soul picture of that moment. And then maybe 30 years later, she's standing there in front of her loved one who has been drinking a lot the last few weeks. And all of a sudden they have this argument and they look at each other and say, I don't even know who you are anymore. And all of a sudden she's looking at her lover, male, female, it doesn't matter, from the perspective of a 3-year-old. But she has no idea that she's looking at her father rather than her lover. And these things lay on top. Well, those are what demons are. What happens is we have this idea that they come from somewhere else. Now, can we get possessed? Are there unclean spirits? Absolutely. I've had personal experience of some of the most malevolent stuff you could ever imagine. But let me explain how the system works. This is exactly what Jesus, I'm paraphrasing, but this is exactly what Jesus was trying to tell us, okay? Let's say you've got 2 1-square-foot patches of grass on your lawn, and they're like 20 feet apart, and you box it off with string, and you take readings of creepy crawlies, bacteria, viruses, bugs, whatever. Here, write it all down, walk 20 feet away, same lawn, rope it off, do the exact same kind of reading. They're going to be pretty close, aren't they? But let's take the carcass of a demon. Let's take the carcass of that remembrance of what, I'm not going to say who, did to me night after night as a youth, when I was 5, when I was 6, when I was 7. And I still hear his voice, the sound, the way he would, kind of heighten his voice. And when he would come after me like that. And let's say I just haven't been able to deal with it as much, and all of a sudden it's coming up and I'm not addressing it in any way. So essentially it's like the carcass of a dead rabbit. Let's say I walk over to this 1-square-foot patch and I cut off the system. I drop a carcass right in the middle of it at exactly 98.6 degrees, and I let it sit there for 24 hours. Now, when I come back in 24 hours, do you think there's going to be a difference in the levels of creepy crawlies, bugs, buzzards, viruses on this one with the carcass versus that one? Yeah. But what we do is we mistakenly blame the cleanup crew that's feeding on what's already dead within us as the cause of what we're feeling. That's why it's called a germ theory or a cold theory, because we've never been able to prove it. What I'm saying is, this is exactly what Brian and Annie, I mean, I've been doing breath work, like I said, since 1989. Back then, there was nobody. In the mid-90s, there was basically nobody. We had Leonard and a couple other people, Leonard Orr, but it's like understanding that what does it mean to cast out a demon in Mark 9, which is not Mark 9:16, which is not even in a lot of Bibles. It was cut out of many of the Bibles. Not allowed in a lot of churches, about Yeshua casting out 7 demons. Shiadain, Shabea, which is 7, Shiadain, which is the demon Apek. What does it mean to cast out a demon? I'm going to show you. This is how you cast out a demon. You let it voice. How? Through breath. Through spirit, through Holy Spirit, which is the whole breath, which is your breath. And when your whole breath becomes wholly, fully active, the breath of the Father moves in. And that's what undoes the issue. That's what undoes it. How many demons did he cast out of Magdalene? 7. Wow, what a coinky dink. What are they called in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene? They're called darkness, desire, ignorance, the exhilaration of death, the foolish words of the realm, the foolish visions of the flesh, and hostility and wrath. A guy named, what was his name? I can't think of it, made up. There's like 3 dozen versions of the 7 deadly sins now. They're all made up. Every single version is made up because they didn't understand what was written in the Gospel of Magdalene. What I'm saying is he showed us how to open the energy body and how to allow these demons to voice. And here's the thing. When you can learn to allow the resonance of whatever is seeking to voice in your own system, learn how to be present with that and love it despite any kind of pain and discomfort, only then can you walk through the center of the valley of the shadow of death. Because nothing can touch you unless you're already out of balance. When I hear people talk about surrounding themselves in a crystalline bubble of white light, I'm like, and then your own insecurities come along and go boom. But that's what makes us susceptible, is not being aligned within. And it's amazing, like just, I can only imagine what things would be, although I think the awakening is amazing what we're going through now, but what things could be like if, the guilt, the fear, the shame that was laid on top of the Jesus story had never been put there because it had nothing to do with him. There's nothing more powerful. There's no more powerful way to collapse an open energy body than the frequency patterns of shame and guilt. You can have someone wide open, firing on all cylinders, shooting light out to the furthest extents of the stars and say, oh, yeah, but what about that time? Remember what you did to that girl that used to live next door? Or blah, blah, blah. The whole thing collapses. That's essentially the system that most of the established exoteric Christian churches have set up. And the way they keep us under control is because we don't inform ourselves. Don't know. We don't know that they don't have a clue who wrote the Bible. We don't know that they don't know what the words mean. They're considered experts because they're parroting back what they were programmed with, which was a very specific menu, and they've been eating the menu for thousands of years, but they've never gotten to the meal. And then you find some you go to Baskin Robbins and there's a 90-year-old woman there, and all she cares about is giving you the most amazing cup of ice cream you've ever had in your life. It doesn't matter if she's a Christian, doesn't matter if she's read the Bible. What matters is that she's 100% holy and fully present in this moment, and all she's thinking is love and service. Just the arrogance we think of, that's how you're being kept down. If you're around in Brian's sphere, you're in the right place. And all I can say is keep going, because the experts, bless their hearts, I do love them, but they have no clue what they're talking about. None. And I literally would go toe to toe with any of them, not in any kind of a hostile sense. Like, people will sometimes stand up and give me like that about, well, watch out for all the blah, blah. Or they read a book, so now they're an expert or something like that. I get those a lot too. I think Brian gets those maybe sometimes, and I'll usually say something to the effect of, I can answer your question, but I'm going to have to answer it coming at you from like 40 angles at one time. Just to show the truth of what you're really seeking isn't to prove me to be dumb or making up what I'm saying or not knowing. What you're really seeking is your own annihilation. What does that mean? What I mean is, we're always on a path of a word in Aramaic that Yeshua said, we are essentially always seeking our own Holocaust. Nothing to do with World War II or the Gaza Strip, but meaning the destruction of our own false self. Mm-hmm. We're always on that hero's path to transcend that, but you don't transcend it by killing it. You transcend it by accepting it as it is and learning to love it. Mm. And that's when those demons go away. It was like, once I really got deep into that kind of work about 30 years ago, the know-it-alls went away. Mm. I used to get audited by the Catholic Church. They would record me. They would take notes. They would film my stuff, But then eventually they just left me alone. So anyway, I'm just saying, you're a beautiful soul. It's obvious. All that stuff, fuck it. It's not true anyway. Mm. Never was. Mm. Just love yourself. Absolutely.
Courtney, did you have a question or comment?
Oh, I had a reflection, what Dale was talking about earlier, that actually synchronistically he just brought back up around ego. And I find it fascinating that the very thing that our soul came to embody, the humanity, the ego, is the thing that we make wrong. And I see that as, and I see a purpose in everything, but the disconnection, so much can come back to disconnection. And really at the foundation of that, the disconnection between our soul and our humanity, that we're always meant to work together, like our soul being the last thing, beingness that would actually be making the human wrong or wanting to get rid of the ego, like came here to partner with it, to be with it. And although I strive in my work, in my life, or with others, to always be more and more soul-led, because the human is new and my soul knows so much better. The last thing that, at least from a higher perspective and from a more heart-based perspective, the last thing that I want to do is make wrong these parts of me that are newer, and not only new, but in our world now, not ideally parented, and having so many wounds and so much confusion and trying to stay safe and often the most unsafe ways, and how much in the quote unquote Bible that we have now um, the feminine being removed from that. And, like Dale talking about how people didn't respond to anything that he was doing about Magdalene 30 years ago because it was too uncomfortable. It was scary to even face that feminine, um, and how vital that is now, the masculine and feminine reuniting, reconnecting, human and soul reuniting. Um, and people often will hold their breath if I say this, but also being matched pairs, sexuality and spirituality reconnecting. And they've been very, very disconnected to the point that people have really awful, that we can do something with these wounds, but awful experiences like Dale had, like I had from ages 2 to 5. Sorry, I'm in a loud area. 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 of sexual trafficking. And there is no making that okay. And you can also choose to not be the victim of that and use your wounds to create reunification. And it's not about necessarily even forgiving others, because you can't until you find wholeness within yourself around that. So I didn't mean to share that much, but that's just kind of what was reflecting. And hi, Dale, I miss you. And Brian, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
But yeah, thank you for allowing me to share.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing. Anything you want to say in response to that, Dale?
She said it perfectly. I mean, it's I think it kind of back to where we started, which is we're trying to find the truth. But truth has nothing to do with details. It has nothing to do with actions or what happened, or we'll never know. We'll never know what really happened in human history. I've seen people work with the Akashic records and making a big deal out of that. And I'm like, Edgar Cayce said, anybody that can manipulate energy well enough can even shift those. There's no wholly, fully reliable way to know exactly what happened. Even if we reverse time, how do we not to know that we're not going to be jumping across several different dimensions in terms of what happened at Wounded Knee or whatever, It's all about here and now. It really is. It's about now. Sufficient unto the day or the evils thou art of. That word isn't day in Aramaic. There's no word for day. The word's yalmana. It's also in the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. What it actually means is now. Give us now. Now. Sufficient unto now are the evils. What is evil? It's bisha. It's all of the thoughts, all of the beliefs, all the things we grab onto in lieu of being present. All the things that go across the sort of media system of our intellect, and we grab those because that's more important than being here. And it's funny, we all have discomforts, but I'm like, if Viktor Frankl can go through what he went through, that he wrote of in Man's Search for Meaning and all of his other books, but if he can go through what he went through in concentration camps during World War II, chained naked to the floor, watching his loved ones being raped, murdered, and slaughtered, starved to death, gassed, and lit on fire, then I'm pretty sure whatever excuses we have for not being able to be present with our experience don't really have much meaning to them. So just be.
Well, I think this is not, I think for sure, this is the new record for the least I've talked in any podcast I've ever had in my life.
I didn't let you.
Because there's so much good stuff being shared. I don't need to say anything. But I think I will ask one question, and it's about feeling. So it was said about, like, we just follow the feeling. The feeling will direct you. And this is something I've been exploring. It's almost like there's different levels of feeling. And I wondered how you would teach about that, or how you would speak to that. Because there's, like, for example, there's some folks here that are feeling called to move out of different addictions, either currently or in the past, and it doesn't feel good. They're having withdrawal symptoms and they feel like crap actually, you know. And there's sort of like also this sort of like kind of the hedonistic impulse of the moment, which seems like it feels good, but then in the long range, it's not a good thing, right? So there's that. But it's interesting because like you mentioned, like there's this, I love this example. You said the further you move closer to the sun, you actually will burn more, right? So I think people have this idea that this is, which I had this idea too in the past, that it's just some like, pleasant thing that gets more and more pleasant. And I think there can be periods where it's actually physically painful, emotionally painful, psychologically painful, which leads to this greater level of love and freedom and peace. So yeah, I just wanted you to speak to that, like when we say follow the feeling, right?
Well, just a couple of to open even before that is like, why would we suffer? Why would we burn getting closer to the light of God? And I have a quote that I've been saying. I wrote it on the inside when I first read Being Peace from Thich Nhat Hanh. That would be 1991. And I have it somewhere here on inside the cover. And I wrote that our suffering is always in 100% direct proportion to our resistance. We suffer because we resist. What do we resist? We resist now. Why are we resisting now? Because we don't like how it feels. So that the idea of sort of getting closer to the light of God and us, essentially burning or suffering. Why? Because we're still holding on to that part in us that believes that we're not that. We're still, because this still, even if it's painful, it still feels safe. It's that, what is the effect that the kidnapped falls in the whatever effect, the falls with the captor, and basically the police will show up and a guy's had a woman in a cage for 30 years or a child and they won't leave because they're terrified because that's all that they know, that. But I think that the real key beyond that is the differentiation between feeling and emotion.
Right.
Emotion, yep, from Latin is motus anima. It means energy in motion, breath in motion. To me, and this is just a visualization, there's no right or wrong. I've always kind of, I happen to have this, experienced emotion like, this is a duo chime. It's supposed to be the same thing twice. It's unison, but it's not unison. One's a little out of beat with the other. So let's say one's our eternal self, the I within the I, and the other is the Brian, the Dale, the I. Okay? And what's interesting is I feel like our life on the level of feeling is that third voice, which is that energetic relationship between absolute truth and whatever truth it is that we're kind of weaving here in our human dimension. And emotion, it's funny, I don't want to go deep into thought and feeling. All this lionization of thought is not true. Even the ancients knew that thought was the effect of feeling, which is the perception of pure frequency, not to be confused with emotion, which is the relationship between our manifestation and our, true nature, absolute truth, whatever. But feeling is that pure initial perception of frequency. So if I talk to people about being spiritual or coming to that feeling level, what I'm saying is walk into a room and regardless of whatever mental commentary might be happening, you've got 5 senses. Technically, they say we have 21, is it, I believe? 21 senses. But we haven't clearly categorized all the others. But go into a room and rather than a need to think, be there. So it's like the movement of air on your skin. What does it smell like? What does it sound like? Without needing to form thought. And when you start living on that level, it's a little harder at a Metallica concert, although you could still be really in the moment at something like that too. But when you start paying attention to now and come back to that rise and fall of the breath, beating of the heart, and then you start realizing that feeling is always there when you pay attention. Then when these other, I almost want to say cross patterns or dissonant patterns, like when the violins go out of tune in the string section because of that crap that happened when you were 12 years old or something rises, the more time you spend in that beauty of the present moment, when those cross hatches come up, I don't want to say the stronger, but the more willing you'll be to breathe into them, and in allowing the dark cloud, whatever it is, it's not a bad thing, just allowing that to move over your being. And, you know, 2 words that I say constantly: keep going. And then I remember from the Hebrew Bible, this too shall pass. And I think we need a lot of that right now. This too shall pass. Because you're not what you feel. It's almost like it's like a painting about who you are. Who you are, you can't touch, you can't see, you can't taste. Your senses can't come anywhere near that. What you're really experiencing as feeling and emotion is almost like outgassing is not a romantic word, but like this emanation.
It's like a fart
of the relationship between your true nature and your experience. What was that? What'd you say?
I said it's like a fart, an outgassing.
It's a little less romantic, but
you can use that in your next talk. You have my permission.
Yeah, I'll let you do it, and then I'll cap it off at the end. Cap it off at the end. I didn't really think that one through, but I'll plug it up when you're done.
Yeah. But the emotion is temporary, right? The thought is temporary, and then everything we experience is temporary.
Everything is. I hear Vincent Gardenia in Moonstruck. Everything is temporary. Every time I hear temporary, that he comes to me.
But it's interesting hearing you talk, and this kind of gets into what Courtney was talking about. The feeling is really almost a physical, embodied feeling, right? Almost like you're a music lover, right? So we kind of used this metaphor before. It's like, well, how do you know what the truth is? How do you know which direction to go? How do you, what do I do? What do I say? And it's like when you hit a chord and you're like, oh, that's totally in tune. That's it. That's out of tune. Right. So I feel like when your mind is quiet, your heart's open, you're receptive, you're in the moment, you can tell if something's in tune or out of tune. Because your body is either vibrating in accordance with it or it's not. Right.
And the willingness is the key. The willingness, like a Swiss watchmaker, there's certain watches that they have to use magnets. But the first thing they have to do is loosen all the parts and then move over it in several different patterns with these magnets and then winch everything down. And the point in that is you've got to have that, willingness. In Michael Rice's words, willingness is the cosmic grease. And understanding that even if I'm feeling it, it's not necessarily who I am, because who I am, if I can use those words even in whatever context, I can't even know fully who I am. I can only be who I am. And the more I know is nothing but a reflection, which has to be fractured on some level. There's no such thing as a perfect reflection in the manifest universe. Everything is going to you can call it a flaw, you can call it a strength, you can call it whatever, but even looking in a mirror, you think, oh, that's a perfect reflection. Well, yeah, compared to a piece of tinfoil. But if I get in here with a radon microscope or something like that, I'll find all kinds of perfections. But the thing is, we mistake, that's where the guilt and the shame and those kinds of emotions come in and thread with the feeling. It's like people say, well, they haven't talked in 30 years. Well, it's like, yeah, because they're probably holding lots of guilt, fear, and shame about something that never happened in the first place. But they just kind of think that it happened. And then you wrap that in with all these other stories, and it's like, It's all right here if we can just pay attention and understand that, you know, another quote from Dr. Michael Rice, the symptoms of healing are identical to the symptoms of disease. Coming out, it looks pretty much and feels the same as it did going in. But the intensity will increase depending on how much resistance we put in. The more we resist, the more we will suffer.
Just
I
one.
try to explain that to my 3-year-old, but she still hasn't gotten that one yet.
You're talking about how we don't know who we really are and we can't know who we really are, right? And just wanted to add that I would say the same thing is true about Christ. Like there's
And
no
God.
way
You can't know
and
God. You can,
right.
Yeah.
There's no way we could. And the amazing thing, Dale, is like hearing you talk. Like if I would have heard you talk just not that, whatever years ago, I would have thought this was like some super new age progressive version of Christianity. But then if you go back to
I've never heard that before.
If you go back to the OGs, I see them saying what you're saying, right? I think over time it got distorted in different directions, but I really don't see a difference between. I think you're more to the original source of the transmission. But anyway, Christ, you can't know Christ with the mind. Like you can maybe know a piece or a fragment, or you can get a little something. But I find like for me, like such a powerful prayer or meditation or contemplation is to basically go deeper and deeper into Christ without knowing who he is, right? And in doing that, going deeper and deeper, the only way I can know is through that attunement, like you're tuning, like the chord is getting tuned. The more I go deeper and deeper in, and so the only way to know Christ is to realize our oneness with Christ and with God, beyond the mind, beyond the temporary emotions. And
well, it's like in order to know, we need a knower plus a known.
Yeah.
So if you want to know God, you need God plus you. If you want to know Christ, it's you plus Christ. And not understanding that, well, Christos, if you take that back to Aramaic, the word's Mashiach. Mashiach. Oh, wow, look at that. Messiah. What is a Messiah? Messiah pivots on two sounds, the Mulch sound, which is the same sound that's at the root of Mulchuta, kingdom, which is a feminine gendered term, meaning a state of being, not a place or a location, different talk. But like a Messiah, a Christ, Christos, is one who walks between the seen and the unseen. It's essentially I don't want to put it into a box of a shaman, but it's essentially, it's that innate, like I say, it's the innate guidance system that Yeshua was pointing us back to the whole time. But as Eckhart says, we were watching the Jesus finger. They say, Eckhart's like, you got a ball and you throw it and you're going to the dog. It's there. The ball is there. And the dog's going, watching your finger. We're obsessed with the Jesus finger. What did the Jesus finger touch? Did he write anything? What did he say? When the whole time he's trying to say, hey, if you pay attention, you wouldn't be looking at my finger right now. We are what we're looking for. What you're looking for is what is looking.
How can people connect to what you're doing and what you're up to?
Did you say something to me
I said,
or just something in general?
Dale Allen Hoffman, how can people connect to what you're doing and what you're up to?
I don't know.
I thought you were giving some super mystical answer there. I'm like, whoa, this is deep.
No. Oh, my deep.
Go into the word list.
Well, I mean, that's like what Robert Thurman did in the I Am movie. Just kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but anyway, just Google my name, Dale Allen Hoffman. If you just write the word Dale Aramaic and then Aramaic, pages of stuff will come up. I would highly encourage people to go on my website. It's just daleallenhoffman.com. You can Google me if you're not spelling my name right or whatever, or go to aramaicinsight.com and sign up on my email list, because I've got some really mind-boggling stuff coming down the pike over the next few weeks and months. But I'm easy to find. I'm on all that social media stuff. If you can find him, you can find me.
All that stuff the kids are up to these days on social media.
Yeah. I don't have enough of them. I need more. I was looking at the top of my email that I sent out about this, and there was like 12 social media links. I'm like, I need more. I don't have enough. I didn't think that at all, actually. But yeah, anyway.
Thanks everybody for being here. I did see a question about when will this come out online. Yeah, so this will be out on my YouTube channel and Spotify and Apple, all the podcast places next week. So you can I put the link for the YouTube channel in the chat. And if you have any questions about that or anything else for me, feel free to reach out. Thanks to all the new folks for joining us. We're here every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Live. Thank you so much, Dale, for all your wisdom and channeling of the good news. And have a great night, everybody.
Yeah.
Peace be with you.